Imagine you're the captain of a ship about to start a great voyage. What if I told you that people took vast oceanic trips hundreds of years ago and connected different worlds? Exciting, right? Have you ever wondered how they did that with the technology of their time? Let's explore. From 1450 to 1750, Western, Eastern, and American cultures interacted, which led to the exchange of knowledge and technological innovations. Europeans improved their ship designs and navigation techniques tremendously in this period. But how did they gain all this knowledge? The answer lies in the cross-cultural interactions that occurred. Knowledge from the classical, Islamic, and Asian worlds spread and played a central role in European advancements. States supported the sharing of technology and ideas. Governments helped and funded maritime explorations because they understood the benefits outweighed the risks. But what drove them to take such risks? Economics was the main driver, money. Consider the Portuguese, for example. Their developments in maritime technology boosted their sailing capabilities and allowed them to establish a global trading post empire as they moved around the coast of Africa to the Indian Ocean. They focused on conquest of choke points in global trade, as well as trading posts so that they did not need to do extended occupations of foreign territory. They were not a huge country. They had not been free from the threat of Muslims very long. They vastly increased their wealth and standing on the world stage through exploration and imperialism, though. Similarly, the Spanish sponsored Columbus's voyages, opening new trade routes and increasing, European interactions with other continents. Queen Isabella wanted to gain an army of native converts so that she could launch a crusade against the Middle East. She didn't get that, since Columbus and his men mostly killed off the entire island of Hispaniola through disease, cruelty, and slavery. Bartolomé de las Casas's warnings of the cruelty of Spanish men towards the natives unfortunately ensured the transatlantic slave trade started and made Spain richer under Charles V. Notable voyages such as Vasco da Gama's journey around the Cape of Good Hope to India in 1498 and Ferdinand Magellan's expedition that first circumnavigated the globe in 1522 showcased the challenges and breakthroughs of maritime exploration. Magellan didn't make it back from it himself, as he was killed by the Filipino chief of Mactan, Lapu-Lapu, in one of the first acts of Asian resistance. These expeditions used advancements like the caravel, which was good for exploration, carrack, which was good for exploration with defense, and float, which was good for cargo ships. All were equipped with the lateen sail for better maneuverability, like the ability to sail into the wind, the compass for precise navigation, and astronomical charts guiding sailors through unknown territories. Technologies such as the compass and gunpowder, originally developed in China, became a part of European maritime practices and enhanced navigation and military capabilities at sea. The arrival of silver, especially from the Americas, reshaped global economies. Mines in Potosi became legendary for their vast outputs, fueling the Spanish economy and impacting trade with China, integrating American silver into Asian markets. They also caused economic inflation, which damaged both the Spanish and Chinese economies, especially since taxes were collected in hard currency in China. There were other specific shifts that produced great transformations, like the introduction of European horses and cattle to the Americas, which transformed Native American cultures and farming practices. Similarly, American crops like potatoes and tomatoes were transported to Europe, becoming staples and dramatically altering European diets. This continued into Asia as well, with peppers, tomatoes, and potatoes being staples in certain areas. These transfers also included ancient books, which Europeans began to rediscover how to read and read more broadly. The Renaissance in Europe, inspired by classical ideals that were often transmitted back to the West by the East, absorbed techniques such as Chinese porcelain making and Indian textile patterns. These new skills influenced European arts profoundly. The tales from new lands also prompted intellectual debates on concepts like human rights and expanded scientific inquiry during the Enlightenment, challenging established norms and beliefs. Arabic numerals, vital for modern mathematics, and specific crops like maize and potatoes from the Americas, reshaped agricultural practices and cuisines in Europe and Asia. Education on math, science, and even agriculture was transmitted from distant shores, and Europe benefited from the exchange of knowledge along with the exchange of products, materials, and wealth. Diseases were not the only problematic biological transfer, though. The introduction of invasive species like the European rat to the Americas and the widespread cultivation of tobacco in Virginia altered local ecosystems and economic practices, often displacing indigenous agriculture. European farmers suffered when cheap imports lowered prices in turn, which encouraged greater immigration. The idea of Christian armies or Christian allies or simply greater religious influence encouraged many of those who traveled along on these voyages, especially within the Spanish and Portuguese. The Pope had encouraged both countries with the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the world between them for colonization purposes. Missionaries such as St. Francis Xavier played dual roles in colonization by aiding Portuguese colonial interests in Asia while attempting to convert local populations, intertwining spiritual missions with political and economic goals. In North America, European settlement policies often replaced tribal governance with European-style administrations. This just did not work with the political viewpoints and mindsets of the indigenous people. They did not understand their social structures either. The Spanish, taking the Kachina dolls of the Pueblo people and burning them as satanic, was one of the primary causes of the Pueblo revolt. Mexico City was built directly on Tenochtitlan, which had a lake at its center, which left the city permanently unstable and seismically active, even out to the present. Lasting consequences and resistance movements came from this ignorance of social and habitation structures, such as the Iroquois Confederacy's efforts to maintain autonomy. The expansion of ocean trade networks made changes in labor systems. The introduction of the encomienda system in the Spanish Americas forced native populations into labor under the pretense of protection and religious instruction. Natives were supposed to be protected by a Spanish person who they would then work for. Most of the natives died of disease or ran away, so encomiendas were combined into haciendas to try to make cash crops and products, and this was still inefficient until they unfortunately brought in slaves. In Peru, the encomenda system was turned from a way for young people to get help into the Peruvians, helping the Spanish to Peruvian gold. None of these systems were well liked for some reason. In Europe, the rise of a wealthy merchant class saw women like Isabella d'Este wield significant influence in cultural and political realms, a noble and an entrepreneur beloved by her people, and a rarity in an era dominated by male merchants. Her husband died and her people loved her much more. In the colonies, indigenous and African women often bore the brunt of forced labor. Yet some, like the African-born runaway slave Queen Nanny of the Maroons, led resistance movements against colonial forces. If you drink Blue Mountain coffee, celebrate Queen Nanny, who took the camouflage knowledge of the natives, the military discipline of the Europeans, and made an army for guerrilla warfare that forged a peace with England and made a product we still can enjoy. Not everyone wanted it all. Ming China, for instance, selectively adopted European firearms, but resisted other technologies that conflicted with traditional values, maintaining a rigorous stance on cultural and technological sovereignty. The downside was that after the voyages of Zheng He stopped, they lost their comparative technological advantage. They had 9 masts and steel reinforcement, hundreds of years before Europe, but lost their advantage when they closed off. They never got the chance to take advantage of American technology like Meiji Japan did, since they were forced open much earlier. Still, resistance to European expansion manifested in various forms. From the Pueblo revolts in 1680 against Spanish religious oppression and forced labor to the many Philippine revolts, one even led by Chinese. But the greatest resistance to the Spanish would come from American-born Spanish. Simón Bolívar was not yet born. There was barely any pressure on Spain and Portugal so far. It began, though. Intense rivalry shown by the naval battles between the British and Dutch in the Banda Islands influenced maritime policies and military strategies as European powers vied for control of lucrative spice trade routes. These same conflicts would begin around slaves, cash crops, metal, and all the tools of wealth. The golden age of piracy would be born from the age of exploration and colonization. Where there was unequal trade, there was the chance to acquire advantage by taking. Now back to our story. What if I told you that the simple acts of sharing, taking, and brief interaction were the cornerstones of building the massive global trading networks and empires we know today? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. But nations have risen and fallen repeatedly over simple human contact. Who were our trading partners? Who are our trading partners now? And who will our trading partners be? The circles shift. So as we come full circle, what would the world look like today if these early explorers did not go beyond their shores, driven by curiosity and the support of their states? What if they hadn't shared their knowledge and technology? Tell us in the comments. Share with your friends and classmates, like the video, and subscribe for more AP history.